Dan Sullivan.
Okay, I can't tell if those are boos or if those are, so don't answer, you don't have to answer that. Well, hey, listen, everybody, thank you. I really want to thank Donna to begin with, and all of you, right? It's a beautiful Saturday, and to be honest, I didn't think we'd have such a crowd here, so thank you for taking the time to do this. You know, first, and I actually, my team, I'm going to talk about it here for a minute. I have a really, really good team, both in Alaska and back in DC. If you're somebody who's working as part of my team, you want to raise your hand. We got a bunch all over. So we got Mike Anderson, Kathleen, Xavier, Carrie, Robin, Rachel, Sharon. So they're going to be helping, but I want everybody to be able to see them. My wife Julie's here also. I always ask for a round of applause for her. That's my way to get brownie points. But in all seriousness with my team here, because one of the things I'm going to mention is what we want to be doing in terms of helping everybody here. But let me just first give you a little bit of background on how we've been doing these kind of town halls. So I know there's been a lot of interest in these kind of engagements. And what I like to say, we try to engage, my office does, in all kinds of ways. Media, so I'm always open to the media. I just did a Talk of Alaska a couple days ago. Some of you may have heard. Teletown halls, Facebook town halls. Anyone who comes to DC, we have a rule where we're not always 100% compliant with it, but we try to see literally everybody, I personally, who comes to Washington. And then I do kind of smaller, you know, more targeted meetings, veterans, healthcare. We've been doing tons of healthcare meetings. But I do recognize, and we do agree, that the broader town hall venue can also be very helpful. So we've been doing, hopefully you've seen it, town halls, community meetings, pretty much all over the state. And the one thing that Donna mentioned, and to be honest, I'm sure you've seen in the lower 48, there have been a lot of these meetings where they've kind of gone off the rails and people screaming and interrupting, and we haven't had that yet in Alaska. And I say yet, I mean, I don't mean yet. I don't want today to be the day. But I mean, in all seriousness, everybody's been respectful. Yeah, people are excited about a lot of issues, that's fine. But there is respect, and I do say that in all seriousness because when there is kind of, if you see some of the lower 48 ones, I think what happens is people actually, you know, it can be tough for the people who want to ask questions, right? So hopefully we keep it that way. We did provide the green and red placards, right? Christmas in May. And so that's one way to kind of show that you're interested or not. Let me just make a final point, though, with regard to my team. And by the way, Kathleen and Don already mentioned what I typically do, and you know, some people don't like it, but I'll do an update, right? Maybe 10, 15 minutes, so just giving you information. And then we typically do at least an hour of a Q&A. So I'll do the update here in a minute just to give you kind of, hey, here's some things maybe you didn't know about that we can talk about, might interest you, you might like it, you might not like it. But I do want to mention one thing. You know, we work for all of you. I work for all of you, every one of you. And whether, you know, whether you like that or not, it's the facts. And but we're respectful about that. And I will tell you, I have a team that if you have issues with regard to individual things, if you're a veteran or Social Security challenges or things that impact you, a small business, you're not getting a permit, please, please, please use my team, right? That's what I mean when we work for you. We're not always going to agree on everything, but we always try to be respectful. The other way we engage, you know, I try to get letters out to everybody. We've had more letters already in April of this year than we had all of last year. So we know there's a lot of people who are engaged, and that's important. I read every single one of those, so sometimes it takes time. I edit them, I change them. So, I do. But please, look around when you see the team here today. It's a great team, and they work really hard. And now I'm bragging a little bit on my team. We have a really good record of getting things done for people, individuals, veterans. So use us, because we do work for you. Okay, so here's what I wanted to do. I wanted to just update on what's going on in Congress, in DC. As you know, it's a bit of a chaotic time right now. The three areas that I like to talk about, that I focus on a lot, that I think most Alaskans want us to focus on: economy, strong national security and defense, and assisting people who need help. Right? That's kind of the way I talk about my job. So let me go into those. First, growing the economy. Okay? Right now we're in a recession in Alaska. To me, this is the #1 thing we can be focused on. Right now in the U.S., we have had a flat economy literally for almost 15 years. Okay? 15 years. And that's not good. I mean, hopefully everybody can agree that that is not a good thing. So what I've been trying to do is focus, and what we've been trying to do is focus on growing the U.S. economy. Critical. U.S. economy has not hit 3% GDP growth in almost 15 years. And that's a problem. Everybody in here, I would hope, thinks that we need stronger growth and that that's important. Let me mention something. If we're growing, some of our bigger challenges that we have in the state, that we have in the country, we can tackle those. If we keep growing at 1%, 1.5%, we're gonna have a hard time with almost everything. Let me give you one example that I know nobody's gonna ask me, but it's a huge issue that I focus on. Right now we have a $20 trillion debt. 20 trillion, okay? I have kids. Kids, a lot of you have kids, grandkids. If we don't start growing the economy and getting on that issue, we're going to be the first generation of Americans who have left our kids and grandkids in much worse shape. So 20 trillion, we got to focus on that, and I think that's a really big deal. So,
nationalize the banks, we bought them.
Okay. So let me, hey guys, come on, let's try and keep this. I'm gonna give my statement, and you have a question, you want to nationalize the banks, ask me about what I think about it. So let me tell you what we're trying to do to grow the economy. First, we just passed last year a 5-year long-term highway bill, infrastructure bill. That's going to bring hundreds of millions, about 500 million. Each year it goes up about 50 to Alaska. 500, 550, 600, 650 over the next 5 years. That's really important for the state. That was a bipartisan accomplishment. President Obama signed that. The other thing we've been doing on is rolling back what I think are onerous regulations on the economy. Okay, so we've been using okay, come on, don't be the first group that doesn't show the respect that everybody here deserves, right? So we've been trying, in the Congress, we've been using this thing called the Congressional Review Act to roll back previously issued regulations. And in my view, we're going to continue to focus on that, because that's important. Okay, let me keep, because again, I think this goes to growing the economy. It's very important, very important. Let me give you another area that we're focused on, fisheries, right? Right now, I chair the subcommittee on the Commerce Committee in charge of the Coast Guard, fisheries for the U.S., and we just passed out of the committee just a couple days ago the Coast Guard bill, which has a lot of important stuff in it for Alaska. We also passed out of the committee, these are all very bipartisan, a bill called the Save Our Seas Act. This is a bill I'm working on with Senator Whitehouse, very, again, bipartisan, on ocean debris, ocean plastics. We're hoping to make sure that we're going to be able to clean up our oceans. We're hoping to move that forward soon. We've had a really good success over the last couple of years of actually getting land, federal land, to Alaskans. Very important issue, not huge amounts, but even Midtown Anchorage, we got 10 acres of land, federal land, just been sitting there for years. Senators for the last decade been trying to get that done. We got that done last year. These are things that I think help grow the economy. I think it's really important that we need to diversify the economy, no doubt. Telecoms, tourism, an Arctic economy, aviation. But I will say this, and I'm sure I'm going to get some red cards on this one. I flatly reject, because I think it's bad for the state, I think it's bad for the country, this movement that you see in Washington and you see in some places in Alaska to, quote, keep it in the ground. I think that's going to actually not help our economy. So that's where we would respectfully disagree. But I'm sure actually most Alaskans agree with me on that one. So let me turn to the next issue I talked about: strong military, strong national defense. So I'm sure you see when you pick up the paper, we have a lot of national security challenges right now. Whether it's North Korea, that's a big one, Iran, China, Russia. I like to say, you guys are cracking me up here. I like to say that right now, I mean, that's serious though. These are real challenges that we have right now. One of the things for our state that I think is important is that I think it's being recognized more and more in Washington that Alaska constitutes what I say are 3 pillars of America's military power. We are the cornerstone of missile defense, and that's really important right now given the North Korea threat, the increasing Iran threat. If one of these rogue nations shoots a missile towards anywhere in America, it could be Alaska, it could be New York, it could be LA, it's our men and women in uniform in Alaska that are charged with the capability to track that and shoot it down. We should all be proud of that. I have a bill that I'm going to be introducing next week that would make our missile defenses even more robust. It's very bipartisan because I think most Democrats and Republicans recognize that we got to do more on missile defense because it's a bit of a scary time. Kim Jong-un is going to have a missile, probably within the next couple of years, an intercontinental ballistic nuclear missile that can hit, that's going to be able to range the United States. That's a scary thing, and we need to do more to protect the homeland. And that's almost all based here, and that's something we should all be proud of. The second pillar is we are the hub of air combat power with the F-22s here at J-Bear, with the F-35s coming to Eielson, with a whole another amount of aircraft that we have throughout the state, and the training we have here. We have more aircraft and assets to protect our nation's interests in the Asia Pacific and the Arctic than any place in the world, and that's going to increase. And again, I think that's important. And then finally, we are a platform for expeditionary forces because of our strategic location to be able to deploy really anywhere on a moment's notice. And in Fairbanks, that's the 1st Stryker Brigade. It's the many men and women in the reserves and Army National Guard, and it's what is called the 425 here, based at J-Bear. And I will tell you, one of the things that I worked on harder than anything in my first year in the Senate was when I got into office, the previous administration said they were going to get rid of those 5,000 men and women who constitute the only airborne brigade combat team in the entire Asia Pacific and in the entire Arctic. And we fought that, tooth and nail, fought that, and we kept them. And they're here, and they protect the country, and they're great men and women, and they're your neighbors, and we should all be proud of them. Which brings a final point on our military authority. I always like to say it's three pillars, but it's actually 4, because there's nowhere in the world, and I'm not saying this just because I'm your senator, that has a stronger support for their military than the communities in Alaska. And that's all of you. So thank you for that, because it's really, really important. We're going to keep working on those 3 pillars. As a matter of fact, in the FY17 military appropriations bill that's already been funded, Alaska has almost $600 million of additional funding to help build up some of those forces, and that's, of course, good for the country, but it's good for our economy. So we're going to keep working on that. The third area that I talked about was what I mentioned is called, helping the most vulnerable in society. Probably doesn't surprise a lot of you. I talked about the economy, and I think that when you free up the economy, having a good job is probably the best social program there is. But there's also times when people fall through the cracks. And in my view, there is a role for the government to help those people. Let me give you 3 examples where we're working on that and we've made some progress. We still have a big problem, not only in Alaska, but in the country, with domestic violence and sexual assault. This has been an issue that I've been focused on since I've been Attorney General. Had a law passed last year that helped with that, and have a bill now called the Power Act. It's a bill that I introduced last year that passed the Senate last year. It didn't get through the House. I reintroduced it. What that essentially does is it provides more resources for survivors and victims of domestic violence. Think about this. If you are and I hate to use this kind of harsh language because I know there's kids here, but let's say someone commits a crime, like a crime of rape. The perpetrator gets a 6th Amendment right to counsel. You know what the victim gets? Nothing. Do you think that's fair? I don't think that's fair. So my bill works to address that. In 2014, one day there was at least, according to the National Council on Domestic Violence, one day there was 10,000 survivors of those kind of crimes that went without legal and other services. 10,000, one day in America. So we're trying to get my bill passed. It would do a lot to help that, and it's still a big problem in Alaska, but I think we're making progress. Related to that is the issue of human trafficking. Some of you may have been at the Barefoot Walk today. My wife Julie and I were there. We passed a bipartisan bill last year, the Justice for Victims of Trafficking Act, and believe it or not, I know a lot of you think, oh, what does that have to do with us? That's a problem in Asia or Thailand or Cambodia. There's human trafficking going on in this city right now, okay? And it's horrible, and it happens a lot. And places like Covenant House, where my wife works, and other places are trying to do a lot on that. We passed a very bipartisan bill to address it, but if you don't think it's happening in Alaska or America, it is, and it's horrible, and I think we need to do a lot more. And then the final area that I want to mention is on the opioid and heroin epidemic that's sweeping through the country and sweeping through Alaska. As some of you might remember, I put together what we called our Wellness Summit last August out in the Valley to bring people together, federal officials, the Surgeon General of the United States, the Deputy Secretary of HHS, and I've been hearing this from so many courageous Alaskans who are struggling with this. And what's the good news is we passed what was called the Comprehensive Addiction and Recovery Act. We had a bill right at the end of December that funded for the next 2 years $1 billion of funding for treatment for opioids and heroin. And this budget bill that just came out last week had an increase of 600% for treatment and other areas, almost another $1 billion for opioid treatment. My own view is we need to do more. It's something that I'm very focused on. I believe it's actually getting worse, not better, in Alaska. If you saw the article in Dispatch a couple days ago about the surge in Anchorage, it's a real problem. So, and I will tell you this, it's also something, and I gave a speech to the legislature in Juneau focused a lot on this issue. I'm going to continue to focus on it, but, you know, I think previously there was a thought that the people who have these addiction challenges, you know, put them in jail. I don't think this should be viewed as a crime. It should be viewed as people who this is for people who need help, and that's going to be my continued focus, which I think is an important issue. Let me finish up with a couple other things.
What are you going to do about that?
Come on, you guys. Just wait your turn. Let me finish up with a couple other points. The other thing we've been working on, of course, is advice and consent to the President's cabinet officials and other officials. And I think that there's a number of these cabinet officials, whether it's Secretary Mattis or Ryan Zinke or Secretary Ross, who are going to be good for the Alaska economy and good for our national defense. I also think that and I can't wait to see the red cards on this one. I also think that the Supreme Court Justice, Neil Gorsuch, is going to be, I think he's going to be a very good Supreme Court Justice for Alaska. All right, I'll finish up with a couple issues that I'm sure you're going to be interested in. The approach with regard to the new administration. Okay, some have expressed concerns about President Trump. The way I've been viewing working with the administration is I'm supporting them when their policies are focused on those areas that I talked about, whether it's growing the economy, stronger military, helping the most vulnerable when they need it. But I don't support and I won't defend behavior that I disagree with. Whether it's insults or tweets that I don't agree with, and I haven't supported those kind of things, and I won't. So on certain policies, I've already been, had some differences with them. And
your duty to stand up to him.
And well, I think on certain issues, I certainly am. And then, and let me just finish with kind of what's gone on with the special counsel and the issues that have just come out there. So I've been supportive of the investigations that are taking place in Washington. The Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein, you may have seen, issued an order appointing former FBI Director and former Marine Robert Mueller to be special counsel. So let me give you a little bit, in all seriousness, I want to give you a little background on that. You may have seen, we just had 100 senators meet with the Deputy AG Rosenstein on this issue, so I'm going to give you a little kind of update on that. That special counsel, when you look at the regs under the DOD or DOJ regs, is appointed when, and remember, this is actually appointed by the Trump administration, right? So the Deputy AG is the President's Deputy AG, who was just confirmed in the Senate about a month ago. By the way, very strong bipartisan vote. I think 94 senators voted for him. So this is appointed by the Trump administration, and they do this under the regs when an investigation by the Department of Justice presents a conflict of interest or other extraordinary circumstances, and it would be in the public interest for a special counsel to assume the responsibility for the matter. So that's kind of the regulatory, that's why he did that. Mueller is specific, I'm just giving you the info because I know there's a lot of interest in this, and this literally is just out of the meeting I had with him about 3 days ago. Mueller is specifically vested with the authority to prosecute federal crimes arising out of his investigation of alleged links or coordination between the Trump campaign and the Russian government, any matters arising out of the investigation that began under former Director of the FBI Comey, in other matters prescribed by statute under the jurisdiction of the special counsel, such as perjury, obstruction of justice, leaks of classified information, illegal unmasking of private citizens by the federal government officials. So the bottom line, the special counsel will make his own determinations as to whether and to what extent he consults with the former or informs the Attorney General, and it won't be the Attorney General because Sessions has been recused, but the acting Attorney General on this, which is Rosenstein. Mueller, if you look at his background, I think has been viewed, you know, in a bipartisan way as someone who has a lot of authority, credibility, integrity, and he has been given a great deal of latitude and discretion over this investigation. That was made clear in Deputy Attorney General Rosenstein's briefing to the Senate a couple days ago. And then I literally asked him a question in that briefing. I don't like to give out, you know, what other people said and what other people asked, but I asked this because I said, look, I'm doing a town hall in Anchorage, and I know it's going to be respectful and polite. I didn't say that to him, but I did tell him I was doing a town hall, and I said, my constituents are going to ask me this question, so I'm just going to, I said, now that you're in, what about the other investigations? How does that work? What does it look like? How are you guys thinking from a structural standpoint? So there's a special counsel that he appointed, right? So that's not only Department of Justice, but that other FBI investigation by the acting FBI head, that's all under Mueller now, okay? So those two kind of merge. Then there's the Senate Intel committee that's still doing, but they're still doing their investigation. But that's focused more on kind of counterintelligence issues. Of course, the Senate doesn't have the ability to bring charges or anything. And then there's the Judiciary Committee oversight, which the Senate Judiciary Committee plays that role of oversight of the Justice Department. Some of that, though, might be truncated because if the special counsel is a criminal investigation, they might not be able to hand over or give things to the Senate Judiciary Committee. So those are the three paths that are going on. It's a little confusing. It was something I asked them because I thought all of you would ask. And so let me just end by saying, you know, related to that issue, I really do believe, and I put a statement out when all this was going on, that we need to get back to the rule of law in our countries, because many agencies, in my view, and this has been going on for a long time, this is, you know, many agencies, whether Justice Department, FBI, IRS, we've started to lose that in this country. And I think it started first and foremost with the corrupt and illegal prosecution of former Senator Ted Stevens. And it did. And remember, that was, I mean, I'm not saying this is Democrat or Republican. That was actually under a Republican administration, if you remember. But it's happened. And we need to get back to the point where people trust in the rule of law. I've called that out to my colleagues in the Senate, Democrat or Republican. And, but I'm also hopeful that we can also start to focus back in Washington on issues that I think matter to Alaska and Americans. The ones that I talked about: the economy, strong military, health care reform, energy, infrastructure, regulatory reform, good jobs. I mean, these are all things that people care about, and right now, that's going to be my continued focus. I'm hoping that the White House has the discipline and the focus. I mean, to focus on these issues, which, by the way, these are issues that President Trump ran on. These are issues that I ran on, and I think they're issues that most Americans, most Alaskans want us to focus on. So you have my commitment that we're going to continue to focus on those issues. Come on, guys. You're okay. All right, well, anyways, look, that's my opener. Be glad to take some questions. I do want to encourage people to be respectful, right? You don't want to be the only town hall in Alaska that, you don't want to be the only town hall in Alaska where, you know, you're being rude to your fellow Alaskans by interrupting and, okay, so let's keep this civil. All right, so why don't we start with any and all questions? We'll take them from all comers.
Okay, if you have an open seat next to you, if you wouldn't mind raising your hand. We've got a lot of folks standing in the back. There's lots of open seats. I know the school district discourages us from standing in the aisle, so please, I encourage you to take a seat. There are quite a few seats. So the first question from Wendy Robbins. And Wendy, if you can raise your hand and move to, okay, great, there's Wendy.
Senator Sullivan, thank you for coming.
Sure, thank you, Wendy.
Oh, sorry. Thank you for coming. Income from wages is taxed at twice the rate as income from capital returns, considering all forms of federal taxes. How is this fair to wage earners?
Well, Wendy, let me, I don't know, can you unpack that a little bit more? So say that one again, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Income from wages.
Wages are
so that'll depend on
wages are taxed, personal income tax.
So at the federal level,
at the federal level, yep. they're taxed Social Security, they're taxed Medicare. We have excise taxes. Capital returns.
So capital
interest in capital gains and dividends. Don't pay Social Security, don't pay Medicare. And are taxed much lower on the personal income tax level. And how is that fair to people who work?
Well, look, I think that I'll tell you one thing that hasn't been fair to people who work at all, which is, you know, I talked about how the economy hasn't been growing, but you know what really hasn't been growing is wages in America. They haven't been growing at all, right? Real wages. And so we need to get back to that. Look, I believe in a tax system that I believe in. What we need to do is make our tax system much fairer, right? I think that, for example, you have corporations right now. We have a really high corporate tax rate, one of the highest in the world. No. Yeah, we do.
No, we don't.
It's 35%. It's one of the highest in the industrialized world. But that's a good point. But there are a lot of loopholes in that. Right? There are a lot of loopholes. So you do have examples where big corporations, even though they're taxed at 35%, because of the loopholes, don't pay hardly any taxes. I think that's wrong, okay? So, yeah, they are. They're taxed at 35%. So I think if you close the loopholes, right, and actually made our tax system more fair from that perspective, I think that's an important way to help grow the economy. I don't know. With regard to, you know, obviously our federal tax system, the rate you pay as an individual depends on how much income you make, right? So it's a progressive tax system. The more money you make, the higher your tax rate is. So I don't know if you're
the more money you make, you don't pay more in Social Security because of the cap on what is only taxed for Social Security.
Well, look, I am, if you guys have, and I would love for you to get together with my team. If you have good ideas on how we make our tax system not only fairer and closing loopholes that I would like to close the loopholes so we can help make it a fairer tax system and help grow the economy and get to, I think, one of the issues that you're hitting on is we actually have to get to the point where wages, real wages, are starting to increase again in the country. To me, one of the most important things we can do is not only grow the economy, but start having the stagnant wages that haven't risen really at all in almost 10 years, have those increase. So if you have ideas on how we can do that, we would welcome those. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, next question is from Sarah Stevens. Sure, we can try that. Yep. So Sarah Stevens. Oh, great. Okay.
Hi, Senator Sullivan. Thank you so much for meeting with us. I just said thank you so much for meeting with us.
Sure, thank you, Sarah.
I work in healthcare, specifically women's and children's healthcare. And I wanted to ask you, do you know what it costs to have a baby in Alaska?
Well, our first daughter was born at Camp Pendleton, California, and our second two daughters were born at Providence. I don't know the exact numbers, though. It's been a while. They're teenagers now.
Lucky for you, I do.
I'm looking at my wife. I bet she knows, but I can't bring her up here.
So, current cost for an uncomplicated vaginal delivery in Alaska is between $10,000 and $20,000. For a cesarean section, which is about 30% of deliveries that happen in the U.S., is $40,000 and up. So the proposed provisions of the American Health Care Act allow health insurers to eliminate maternity coverage. So please tell us how you envision Alaskans, those who are insured and also those who might have qualified for Medicaid, how do you envision Alaskans bearing those costs?
Well, look, in terms of the House bill, right, we're kind of starting on our own bill, right? So we're not, so we are focused on ways to help Alaskans address those costs, make sure people on Medicaid, including the people with regard to who undertook the Medicaid expansion, do not have the rug pulled out from under them. And some of the issues that I think that I'm focusing on are making sure that, so a lot of this, in my view, is going to be coming back to the states. One of the issues that I had with regard to, one of the challenges that, you know, you've seen with the Affordable Care Act is that the premiums that Alaskans have been paying in the individual market have skyrocketed, right? And so from
Please let him talk. I really would like to hear the answer to this. Please do continue.
So
Take the burden off the employers. They'll pay bigger wages.
yeah, okay. So I think right now the system, what we've seen, right? I mean, in Alaska, the individual market, like I said, the increases in the premiums have gone through the roof, right? They have. And we've had, we initially in that market had 5 insurers. We're down to 1, right? So from my perspective, what we need to do is bring down the costs, and there's not only, it's not just in terms of coverage, there are costs, there are structural costs in Alaska that no other state in the United States has, because of our large size, because of the high cost of care here, because of the lack of providers that we have here. So one of the things that we've been working on, and I just met with the CMS director 2 days ago, I had another phone call with Dr. Price, the HHS secretary, is looking at ways to address the structural costs in Alaska, because as you mentioned, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I bet those numbers for having a baby in Alaska are a lot higher than they are in almost any other part of the United States. Right? So what I've been focused on, and I've met since December with well over 1,000 Alaskans in all different kinds of elements of our healthcare system. Some people who think the Affordable Care Act is wonderful, some people who think it is a disaster, is to look at what are the structural challenges in Alaska. That's what I've been focused on. And how do we address them through either legislation or a regulatory approach? And what we've been doing, what I've been doing is essentially working not only with the governor's office, but again, providers like primary care providers. And we are trying to bring down those costs that still enable people to have access to coverage, but to also not bankrupting them. Let me give you an example. Just last night, I was at a dinner and a woman came up to me and said her premiums have gone from $500 a month with her and her husband to $2,700 a month under the Affordable Care Act. Okay, that's not access to care. So to me, bringing down the cost, but I'm very, very focused on these structural issues that make healthcare in Alaska so important, and there are some things that I think we can be focused on.
So I do understand what you're saying, but with all due respect, you did support a bill that allowed health insurers to exclude essential health services, such as maternity care,
what bill?
From their coverage. The American Health Care Act.
No, I haven't voted on that.
Oh, sorry. You do support it. You have expressed a constituency.
No, I haven't.
Support it. No.
No, I haven't.
So.
I haven't. So sorry about. I'm just gonna.
I apologize. Yes, my mistake.
Yep.
So, do you think it's appropriate?
So I'm going to give you one. Do I think what's appropriate?
Do you think it's appropriate to exclude maternity coverage?
I don't think it's appropriate to have pre-existing conditions not being able to be covered.
But pregnancy is not necessarily a pre-existing condition. It can happen as many times as your life as you choose for it to happen. Do you support?
I support having health coverage that covers pregnancies. What I don't support is a federal government plan like you have under the Affordable Care Act that says to a 60-year-old male, you have to have insurance that covers maternity. It makes no sense, and that's why you have premiums spiking.
But isn't that just health insurance? I don't need prostate exams, but I pay into a health care plan that provides prostate exams.
So again, I'm just going to end here, and then we can continue to have another debate, but I want to make sure we get more questions. One of the biggest challenges I think you've seen with the Affordable Care Act and why premiums, look, Alaska's, I'm just giving the facts. Premiums have gone up in the individual market 45% per year. We've lost all our insurers except one, okay? And had the state legislature not spent $55 million on a reinsurance fund, the premiums would have spiked as well. One of the biggest reasons for that is because the Affordable Care Act was a one-size-fits-all approach to health care. It essentially said, here are health care benefits that every single person in America has to have, okay? And yet it was, in a way, it made it, the one-size-fits-all certainly doesn't work with different states, and it certainly hasn't worked with Alaska. So we are certainly looking at trying to address these issues in a way that gives states more freedom, but I do think there are certain elements, which is why I talk about repair and repeal and repair, not repeal and replace, because there's certain elements of the Affordable Care Act that I think we need to keep. Pre-existing conditions need to be covered. If you're on your children can be on their parents' coverage till they're 26, and no caps, right? So there are some elements that I think are important, but to me, the thrust of what we need to be doing is letting the states who understand their market much better than bureaucrats in Washington, D.C. design a program that fits Alaska. And that's what I'm focused on doing. But thank you for your question.
Thank you for your answer.
Okay, next question is from Lyon Johnson. Okay, and then we'll try the two. So Lyon's next, and then after Lyon will be W. Keys.
Thanks for this opportunity. I have one question, just answer it. I mean, it just takes one word, all right? Is healthcare a right or a privilege? One word.
I want to be able to cover
One word! Please, please.
Well, I mean, I don't agree with the premise of your question.
Please.
I believe that we need to have access for affordable health care for all Alaskans. That's my answer. That's my answer.
We had our representative death panel Dawn vote like he did, and I just hope that you don't have to live with Facebook posts of people dying because of your bill.
W. Keys. I can't tell if W. Keys is, oh, we got a microphone, please.
Okay.
I think this is going to be a really good question.
Well, first of all, I want to thank you for having a town hall, and I want to thank you for your service in the United States Marines, whose members are known for courage and bravery. Okay, we're now faced with a new health care bill that's going through the Congress. It's going to be changed before it gets there. But some of this does not cover pre-existing conditions. It does not
in the current bill.
In the current bill, yeah. And I understand you're going to change it, but the current bill has made provisions to not cover maternity care and not cover emergency room care. Now, estimates show that Alaskans will pay huge increases under this bill as it's currently written. Yeah. And every estimate I've seen shows that Alaskans are going to pay the most more than any other state. According to all reports that I have ever seen, you almost always vote in accordance with the Republican Party line. Now, my question is simple. Are you able and willing to summon the courage and bravery from your Marine days in order to defy your party's wishes if it is in the best interest of Alaskans on health care?
Well, just for the record, I'm still in the Marines. And look, I don't disagree with some of what you said about elements of the House bill that would negatively impact Alaska, okay? Like, let me give you an example, in the individual market. And one of the reasons is, I am answering the question, one of the reasons is what you saw in that market is, as I mentioned, dramatic increases in premiums. And that's happened, right? That's to about 20,000 people on the individual market. Now, some, like the woman I met last night, don't get any subsidies. So when your premiums go from $500 a month to $2,700 a month, and then you have a $10,000 deductible, you're not getting health care coverage, okay? And that's a lot of Alaskans are having that problem right now, okay? That's a fact. I get letters, I get emails from them, okay? Now, a lot of people in the individual market, even though the premiums went up, they got subsidies. So their premiums were going up, but they were getting the subsidies, so they didn't feel that. And as you mentioned, W, is it W?
Just keys.
I thought it was W. What you mentioned is that when those individuals lose that subsidy, in my view, they're going to be very negatively impacted, okay? So I've been working night and day on ways to try to address that within the bill that the Senate is working. I had a discussion with Secretary Price just the other day on this very issue. I had a discussion with Seema Verma, the CMS director, on this issue. But let me just mention, it's a balance. It's a balance. I have to consider the people who, in my view, are being crushed by the Affordable Care Act right now, and there are a lot of them. There are. If you don't, you can read some of the emails. People's whose premiums have tripled and their deductibles are $15,000. That's not care. So balancing, trying to address their concerns with balancing, trying to address people who, and there are some in Alaska certainly, who have benefited from the Affordable Care Act. So from my perspective, and also focusing on the people who have benefited from the Medicaid expansion. So these are the three key areas that we're trying to balance when we look at the Senate bill that we're working on right now. And from my perspective on this one, I'm fully focused on keeping the interest of our state in mind. But just to get it out in the system and get the biggest boo of the night, I am not supporting a single-payer health system. Sorry, I don't think it'll work.
Okay, next question. Next question is for Erin Laporto. Erin, are you here? Oh, there she is, okay. And then after Erin, Jamie Olson.
Hi, thank you for coming. I'm an Air Force veteran.
Where are you? Oh, hey, Erin.
So thank you for your service too.
All right, you too.
When I was I worked with Combat Search and Rescue. I was a helicopter crew chief maintenance for them.
Great.
So I'm pretty intimately familiar with the number of veterans coming home, alive, but in pieces, not just physically, but emotionally. So my concern is, and I actually do like General Mattis in a general way, but as things get more and more aggressive in Syria and Iraq and Afghanistan, and he said, and I quote, that we are going to surround the enemy and annihilate them. How, as a member of the Armed Services Committee and a current Marine, what are you doing to make sure, what kind of oversight are you providing for what is being asked of our service members?
Yeah. Oh, that's a great question. And by the way, thank you, Erin, for your service. And if you watch you're right, I'm on the Armed Services Committee. If you watch that committee, we're probably the most aggressive oversight committee in the Senate. We have hearings probably, twice a week, and so we conduct those hearings, and not just hearings, but meetings and working with the military all the time. It's a really important question, right? We have national security challenges, not just in the Middle East, not just with Iran, not just North Korea, but we have national security challenges all over the world. And so from my perspective, one of the most important roles that I can play is making sure that young men and women like you who volunteer and go overseas are doing it with regard to a mission that's focused, a mission that will take care of our troops,
and moral,
and
ethical.
A mission that's in the national security interest of the United States. And so those are my criteria. Oh, and that our military members are well funded to do it. And, you know, too often we go tell these young men and women, hey, go fight in the name of our nation's interests, and we don't fund them. You know, with all due respect to the last administration, they wouldn't even admit that our men and women were in combat. Okay, they are in combat.
Actually, I saw Obama come and speak in Afghanistan.
Great. But anyway, so it's a really important role that I have here, and I'm glad that you served and came home safely. The other part of your question where I thought you were going is, you know, what are we doing to take care of our veterans? And that's another really, really important issue. I serve on the Veterans Affairs Committee in addition to the Armed Services Committee. And, you know, one of the many great things about our state is that we have more veterans per capita than any state in the country. And that's something that I think every Alaskan should be proud of. But we got to take care of our veterans. You mentioned mental health. We had this thing called the Choice Act that did not work in Alaska, and so I brought the undersecretary for the VA up here a year and a half ago. He was President Obama's undersecretary for health. He spent a whole week in Alaska with me, going throughout the entire state. We did town hall meetings, we did official Veterans Affairs hearing, and now he was selected by President Trump to be the Secretary of the VA. So right now, the Secretary of the VA, who served as President Obama's undersecretary, knows Alaska a lot. But the VA needs to do a much, much better job of taking care of, you know, young veterans like you and others. And again, if you or anyone else here is a veteran and you have issues with the VA, please, 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 you know, I plead with you, come to my office. We will work on those as hard as we can. So to me, the oversight role is something I'm very, very focused on every day, and I'm glad you asked the question. So thank you.
Thank you.
Was Jamie Olson, did Jamie stand up? No? Okay. Okay, Janice Swiderski. Did I get that right, Janice? Okay, right there.
Okay, thank you for taking my question. I respect the Second Amendment, but I don't want dangerous people carrying guns in our community. There is a bill in Congress right now that would enable dangerous people to buy silencers with no background check whatsoever. Silencers in the wrong hands create a public safety risk and make it harder for police and first responders to react quickly to gunshots. And they undermine our city's gun violence prevention efforts. Will you oppose any effort to make it easier for dangerous people to buy silencers?
Well, Janice, I need to, you know, for those of you who have met me and kind of know the way I operate, I don't commit one way or the other on any kind of bill or any kind of, until I see it and read it. So, you know, the one thing I've been very strong on is our Second Amendment rights, which are enormously important to Alaskans.
I respect the Second Amendment as well.
So I can take a, you know, I can take a look at that, but I actually typically believe that attempts to further restrict Second Amendment rights in Alaska or in the country are not something that I support. One of those, I talked about those Congressional Review Act resolutions where we were rolling back midnight rules by the Obama administration at the end of their term. One of those rules that we rolled back was they were trying to look at if you had some kind of Social Security disability, that they were trying to get that sent to a system where they could maybe restrict your access to a gun. So I think that's the kind of thing that we need to be vigilant to guard against.
mentally ill people should not own a gun, I don't believe. That's my belief. Also, I don't understand how you can stand up there and say that you support the military, and then you vote with the NRAs and the gun lobby to roll back keeping guns away from mentally ill people. The military is suffering through a great many suicides right now due to PTSD. And you are giving guns back to those men and women to commit suicide. That's how I feel about that. I don't understand what the logic is to give guns back to someone who is a danger to themselves or to others. Also, you stand there and you say you care about domestic violence. And do you know that women in the United States are 16 times more likely to be killed with a gun as women in other high-income countries? And the majority of those that are killed by the domestic partner. These people need to have guns taken away from them.
Let me just, look, I'm very committed to, I always have been, I will continue to be, addressing the problems in Alaska and across country of domestic violence. I have a record of doing that. I'm going to continue to do that, and I will also. Let me just finish. And I will also tell you that the first bill I co-sponsored as a U.S. Senator was called the Clay Hunt Suicide Protection Act, that was named after a Marine sniper who unfortunately took his own life. And so the idea is somehow that I'm advocating for policies that help veterans commit suicide.
Well, then why did you
I
vote
actually
for that?
find offensive. So I don't agree with you at all on that. So, but otherwise on Second Amendment issues, you and I can disagree.
Okay, next question is from Mary Schallert. Is Mary? Okay. And after Mary will be Nancy Ball or Bale? Can't tell. Okay.
Senator Sullivan, do you know that most physicians, 59%, and an even higher proportion of Americans, 62% or more, support single-payer national health insurance or Medicare for all? You have great health care. I know you do. All senators and congressmen have great health care. Why can't we have what you have, or you have what we have?
So just for the record, my staff and I are in the Obamacare individual exchange. It's called HealthLink Exchange. So some members, I believe, were allowed to exempt themselves from Obamacare. I said, if all of you have to deal with Obamacare, I'm going to deal with Obamacare. So I have the same insurance that anyone else under the Affordable Care Act has. So that's so and as I mentioned, I'll just respectfully disagree with all of you on single payer.
Nancy?
You want me to move to Russia?
Okay, Nancy, let Nancy ask her question. Thanks.
Senator Sullivan, it's good to meet you again. I think you remember you met me in something like 2006 at John Nierenberg's Earth Song Lodge up on the Stampede Road. That was when you were the commission of DNR. So we've both come a long way since then. And what I'm just going to ask you tonight is just a question that I think others in the room would resonate too, that you and Senator Murkowski have the opportunity to calm the rhetoric.
Yeah.
And so when I say calm the rhetoric, I mean stop the use of the term repeal and replace. Stop the use of the term federal overreach. Those are two big, huge terms that are used that do not describe my experience of Alaska. And I've been here since 1971. So if you and Ms. Murkowski could help calm that rhetoric, it would go a long way toward making the rest of us feel as if we really are your constituents. And in connection with that, I know that you used the CRA to defeat the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service regs. Just know that there are a lot of Alaskans that disagreed with that. There are a lot of questions that Alaskans have about the management of our wildlife by our Department of Fish and Game. And it's just now beginning in our Congress because the Board of Game won't act to do reasonable closures in areas where it makes sense. So, you know, if you could calm the rhetoric and help research these areas, work with the Alaskans, you know them all, and help us feel like we're really your constituents.
Well, Nancy, I appreciate that sentiment. I appreciate and I agree with the idea of the calming of the rhetoric. I try to always be respectful to my constituents, and so that notion of calming the rhetoric, you know, I don't disagree with that. So I appreciate the way you talked about it. You probably know you and I respectfully disagree on the Fish and Wildlife Service. CRA, I thought that was actually really important for Alaskans, and I would say, you know, most Alaskans agreed with that, but maybe you didn't. So I mean, we can respectfully disagree in a way that's respectful, and so thank you for that sentiment. I appreciate it, and I am trying to do that. Hopefully, you see that we're always. Look, I mean, I know if I say this, I'm going to get a bunch of red markers, but, you know, you are my constituents. And I do respect your views, and I do, and I do listen, and, you know, we don't always agree, but I certainly try to be respectful, and I appreciate the outreach, and I appreciate being invited to this town hall. Believe it or not.
Okay, next question, Joe Swiss. Joe? No? Okay. Ben Virgin. Okay.
Senator, thank you for coming and doing the town hall today. I just had a quick question. I want to know if you can commit to protecting Medicaid expansion in our state.
So Ben, this is an issue that, and look, I will tell you on this one, I've been working on this a lot, and let me just kind of talk through a little bit of it, because I think it's important on the. I'll just give you my views on this, and my view is right now. So we have the expansion population, right? So, and I think all of you are familiar, but I'll just mention it because it's an opportunity to talk about this, because it's a really important issue, and it's a challenging issue in the Senate right now, and I'll give you a reason why. My view is I don't think anyone who is part of the expanded population, you know, should be thrown off that. Okay. So now, here's the challenge with that. The expanded population, as you guys probably know, so right now Medicaid, when it was designed in the late 60s, was for people under the poverty line, disabled, blind, and pregnant. Okay, that's the general population. Okay, that's what it covered. No, I mean Medicaid. Okay, That was really good. Okay, so what happened with the expansion population was that the federal government, under the Affordable Care Act, said to states, okay, we can expand Medicaid to cover able-bodied citizens who are 138% above the poverty line, okay? Now, in Alaska, but there's a match, right? The state is responsible for a certain amount of Medicaid, that initial population, and then the feds are responsible for the other part. Alaska actually has a kind of, in terms of the match, we don't have a very good match. So we're 50-50. Feds pay half, we pay half. Some states it's 70-30, feds pay for the original population. The expanded population, the feds said, we'll pay for all of it. We'll pay for all of it. No worry about the match, 100%, which is why it was so tempting for many states to take it. But there's a couple things there. Think about that. This is something that doesn't get talked about a lot. And trust me, I've met with some Alaskans who are in that original population. Right now, the federal government much more generously pays for an able-bodied, non-disabled Alaskan above the poverty line for Medicaid than it does for a blind Alaskan. Okay? That's a challenge. So what's happened under the Affordable Care Act is that coverage in terms of the match for the expanded population starts to come down, right? And that's why a lot of states said, we're not going to do this. Because if the feds at a certain point say, we're not going to pay for it anymore, then it's going to be a huge fiscal requirement for the state to cover. So that's why, even though it was very tempting, a lot of states said, we're not going to do that because fiscally, if the feds walk away from it, we're going to be in a lot of trouble. We did it. We took it, okay? So right now, it goes under Obamacare, it goes from 100% to it ratchets down to about 90% match to 10% by the feds. So this is the challenge because some states didn't take the expansion at all. And so there's a real...
Senator, we did, and I just would like to ask whether or not you will commit to protecting the Medicaid expansion in our state.
Okay. So let me, right now, believe it or not, the House bill actually, let me explain what the House bill does. The House bill in its current form actually covers the expanded population, okay? It does. What happens is, under the House bill, if you continue to join Medicaid expansion up until 2020, you're covered at the high rate, the 90-10, okay? And then if you stay on Medicaid, even into the future, you're in the expanded population, that coverage stays 90-10. The thing with the House bill, though, if you get off, so let's say you're actually working and you don't qualify anymore, you get off and then you get back on the expanded population, then you're covered at the 50-50 in Alaska, 50-50 match. So in many ways, the House bill actually does that. So what I've been trying to focus on is making sure that the people in the Medicaid expanded population in the state, because they did it, it was legal, it was that they don't get the rug pulled out from under them. That's where I'm focused on.
Okay, next question is from Ross Beeling. Next question from Ross.
Thank you, Senator, for taking my question. As you're aware, your chief of staff, Joe Baelish, had reached out to me, and we talked about some different things in healthcare, and one of them was competitive bidding. He had 3 or 4 people in the room. So in deference to that, I want folks to know this man is looking at all avenues to do the right decision for all the Alaskans, okay? Now,
Thank you, Ross.
My question is this. The challenge is clear. My healthcare background is 36 years, and we've talked in the past, but the challenge is Obamacare didn't work because you couldn't control the costs. And so where we're at now is, in the current effort coming out of the House and now in the Senate, do you see, certainly in Alaska, as competition successfully driving costs lower, which we don't have competition? Evidence earlier when the lady talked about child care in terms of childbirth. When you have two hospitals, you really, unless you have competitive bidding and so forth, you don't get competition. And when you get competition, you drive costs lower and improve quality. So is that something that you think should be on, or might be on the calendar in concert with earlier discussions with Joe and staff?
Yeah, look, you raise a really important point, and I think sometimes it's an issue that gets missed, and it's really important. And I actually think it's an issue that almost everybody here could or should agree with, is that there are drivers in the system, not just in Alaska, but nationally, where the costs are driving up healthcare for everybody. So if we could have more competition, which is one of the reasons I'm very skeptical of the single payer system, and I know that doesn't, but let me give you a couple other examples. More competition typically helps reduce costs. You know, one of the things about the Affordable Care Act didn't have any kind of lawsuit reform, right? So there was nothing with regard to medical malpractice reform, which, you know, a lot of studies show that drives up the costs, where doctors have to practice defensive medicine, and they have to, you know, have a battery of tests for anyone who comes in on any issue, because they feel as if they don't, there'll be a lawsuit. So there's ways that you can do medical malpractice reform. And then I actually think, and it's an issue I've been looking into, and it's an important issue, is in the world of the pharmaceutical and drug companies, right? We need to do more, much more in my view, to help control the costs of rising drugs that are going through the roof. So your point, and these are all separate from kind of the idea of just additional coverage. These are certain things that the Affordable Care Act didn't focus on, and I'm hopeful that both not only Republicans but Democrats can agree that these are things that we all need to do together. These are not, they're not controversial, but we haven't done them yet. So I agree 100% with your ideas, and I know you've been looking at these issues for decades, Ross. So I appreciate you asking that question.
Thank you. Two numbers, Senator. The state spends almost $600 million a year on health care for state employees. So folks are state employees in here and so forth. That in conjunction with the muni at $2,800 per month on health care. What's happening, we had Sheldon Fisher come and talk to us Commonwealth North a couple weeks ago. What's happening, it would appear, is that, and they're conscious of it, is the reason why our costs are so high in Alaska is because they can be. And that's something to keep in mind, just give those numbers you may be aware of, as part of that, you know, you'll hear healthcare authority and so forth, but when you bring all your business to one person or one business, then you put other people out of business. So.
Yep.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you.
Okay, next question is from Melissa Cheney.
Hi, so I've written you numerous times about healthcare, so I've got a different topic. So my topic is, you and Lisa Murkowski supported Betsy DeVos, who and Betsy DeVos supports vouchers. My question to you is, how do you think that's going to work here in Alaska? I mean, kind of think about Molly Hooch. You know, how are we going to support education in rural communities by vouchers? I mean, maybe I'm ignorant, but usually, you know, vouchers would go to Christian schools, which I'm sure you support, but I'm not sure how we're going to support education in rural communities with vouchers.
Yeah.
That's my question.
Well, look, you're making a really good point, and I had a number of discussions with Betsy DeVos about this very topic, which is in most communities in Alaska, there is no choice, right? Particularly in the rural communities. There's usually one school, and it's sometimes, unfortunately, hanging by a thread. So, I'm someone who's been very supportive of public school education. My wife was a PTSA president for our kids' middle school. We have sent our kids to parochial school here and into public schools. And I'm a big supporter of, our teachers and who do a great job, and was very focused on what was called the Every Student Succeeds Act, which had broad-based bipartisan support, had the strong support of Alaska teachers, and this was a bill that was really important to say the federal government doesn't need to control our secondary school education. The teachers, administrators, and parents in the states do, and that's why that bill passed so overwhelmingly. So one of the things I focused on when I had numerous discussions with Betsy DeVos was to make sure she focused on the Every Student Succeeds Act, which again, very strong support from our teachers here, our school administrators. And I'm going to get her up here. She is now the secretary of, but I think there's opportunities. So I certainly want her to come, but to see exactly what you're talking about, which is in a lot of places in our great state, there is no choice. So what we need to do is make sure that the school that is there is the best school possible. And that's what I'm focused on, and that's what she and I talked about.
Okay, next question from David Morgan. David Morgan. And then Suzanne Snyder will be next.
I can't believe it statistically. It shouldn't work this way. I've been in healthcare economics and finance for 30 years. 15 years working for South Central Foundation, 5 for Providence, and 5 years in Eastern Aleutian Tribes. Most of what I've heard here is devoid of any reality of the economic impact of this. Next year, if you, on a group plan or individual plan, costs more than $10,000 a year, and there's another number for families, are going to get hit with a 40% excise tax under the current law.
Thank you.
It's leveraged by the insurance companies. Medicaid expansion by the state legislature is going to cost us $60 million, plus $55 million for the pool, plus we're averaging 9.8 to 12% increase in general healthcare costs. This policy, unless you're on Medicaid or Medicare and getting free care, is a disaster for small business, group plans, and individuals. And here it comes.
Which policy? You're talking about the Affordable Care Act.
The Affordable Care Act right now. Yeah. My personal policy in the individual market went from $400 a month to almost $1,900 a month. Hey, if you knew people on Medicare, they got some questions too. Now, my deductible went up to almost $3,500. I've never spent a night in the hospital in the last 20 years. My question is, can you fix this and change it so this will not? I paid more in health care insurance costs last year than I paid in federal income tax. I find that ridiculous. I'd like to know what you're going to do to change this economic situation.
Well, look, I think you're speaking for hundreds. I don't think. I know you're speaking for hundreds and hundreds of Alaskans, right? Yeah, he is. I mean, I see the letters. I see the emails. Okay? And it's not just premiums that are bankrupting people. It's also small businesses that create jobs. I mean, right now, in my view, well, heck, it's not just me. The governor's own insurance commissioner said that our individual market, for the reasons you talk about, is in chaos. Okay? We're trying, no, that has nothing to do with the GOP, trust me. That was purely the Affordable Care Act, okay? So we are working, David, to address as many of those issues. Look, we understand that these issues are very complex. They're very personal, and they impact families in an enormous way. What you're experiencing, like I said, that's not access to care. If you're paying, you know, $30,000 in premiums and a deductible before you see 1 ounce of health care coverage, I don't see how you can call that health care, because it isn't. You can't afford it. So there are a number of things that we're trying to do. It's a balance between what we talked about, keeping certain basic elements to an individual plan, right? That's why I called it, and you know, the comment earlier, that's why I call it repeal and repair, not replace, because there are elements of the Affordable Care Act that I think are important. But one of the things that we're very focused on is trying to bring the ability for the states who understand the healthcare needs of their citizens way better than anyone in Washington to have more authority and more ability to create a healthcare system that fits for Alaska. Okay, the focus from the federal government side will be to provide significant funds to enable states to do that. Let me give you one example that's actually the state of Alaska has done a pretty good job on. This reinsurance fund that the legislature passed last year was $55 million. Well, that was probably the main reason why last year our premium increases only went up about, I think, 14 or 15%. Had the state not done that, so that was a reinsurance fund that was able to address some of the really, really high-cost individuals in the individual market and enabled that to happen in a way that didn't crank up insurance premiums on everybody else in the market. So that is one way to do it, kind of a, what they're calling a innovation fund for states. And I think when you have the state, which knows Alaska way better than anyone in Washington, D.C., being able to design these to get what we all want, which is affordable access to care for everybody, that to me is the direction we're going, and that's why I think, you know, what you're talking about, a one-size-fits-all, for some people in Alaska it's worked fine. For people like you, David, I hate to tell you, but I don't have to tell you, it's been a disaster. And I don't think the federal government should be creating disasters for their citizens, and that's what happened for hundreds and hundreds of Alaskans.
Okay, this is going to be the last question, and Suzanne Snyder. I didn't see if Suzanne. Oh, there you are. Okay.
How about some non-healthcare questions?
Senator Sullivan, thank you for taking my question.
Where is she? Oh, there you are.
As a millennial and as a woman and as a college student, I rely very heavily on Planned Parenthood, and thank you. So Senator Murkowski has explicitly stated that she will work to protect Medicaid and Planned Parenthood. These are both very important programs. And I'm wondering if you're willing to make that same commitment to Alaskans.
Well, I talked about as I mentioned, I'm very focused on on the Medicaid issue for Alaska, and we're going to be continuing to be on that. And with regard to the funding of Planned Parenthood, I actually think that it would be much more fair and effective if we took the $500 million that Planned Parenthood gets every year and distribute that to community health clinics. So right now in Alaska, there's four Planned Parenthood clinics, and there's almost 160 community health clinics that in many ways have as much, if not more, provisions for women's health than Planned Parenthood does. And I think it's a much more fair and equitable way to reach as many Alaskans as possible to be able to have those funds go to community health clinics. Why don't we do two more? A couple
Two more? Okay. Two more.
Okay, Warren Jones. Warren, are you here? Right there? Okay. Oh, good. Okay. And then Allison Pate.
Thank you for being here, Senator Sullivan. My question is, what are you doing in the Senate about climate change?
Well, look, I think we're clearly seeing the effects of climate change in Alaska, and this is the most green I've gotten all night. But what I don't agree with is, again, a top-down approach to addressing it. So let me give you a couple of answers. One of the things that I think is actually really important is a true all-of-the-above strategy with regard to energy, right? An all-of-the-above strategy. So let me give you one example. You know, Alaska, of course, we have oil and natural gas, but we have, you know, hydro and wind, and in Southeast, we have entire communities that are driven by hydro. And I think the more we can address our energy needs through an all-of-the-above strategy, I think that it's actually really helpful. Let me give you a specific example. You know, President Obama used to talk about how greenhouse gas emissions during the Obama administration years declined, which was true. But he never actually said the next sentence, which was the reason they declined was because the revolution in terms of natural gas. That's a fact, okay? So if we can do more to produce clean burning natural gas, if we can actually develop Alaska natural gas and send it to China and let them shut down coal plants in favor of natural gas, there's a lot we can be doing, but I thought the last administration was so focused on trying to shut down our ability to develop our resources here, which hurts the economy, and didn't do anything to help address reducing greenhouse gas emissions. So to me, it's all of the above, and then you also have to do it legally. You know, the Clean Power Plan that was designed by the last administration, the U.S. Supreme Court, first time in the history of the Supreme Court's existence, put a stay on that without any other court hearing it, because they almost certainly believed it wasn't legal. Even Lawrence Tribe, a very well-respected but very liberal professor, said that the Clean Power Plan of the EPA was trying to commit a trifecta of undermining the judiciary, states, and the Congress's authority. And then he said, burning the Constitution should not be our energy policy. This is Lawrence Tribe. So whatever we need to do, we also need to do it legally. And I don't think the last administration did that. And I think that in terms of our... But to answer your question, I think it's an all-of-the-above strategy that Alaska can play a really, really important role, not only here, but if we're exporting clean burning natural gas, which we have in abundance, to countries in Asia. That's going to do a lot to make the environment cleaner.
Okay, Allison, I didn't see if you stood up. Allison? Oh, good, okay.
Okay. I was going to ask you about science, but everyone wants to ask me to ask you about Russia. So I will. So the special counsel is focused on whether any crimes were committed, and it's by nature a secretive process, which is important. But I think there's the separate issue of the American public wanting answers about what actually happened. And I have nothing but respect for Mr. Warner and Mr. Burr and the Senate Intelligence Committee, but I think there's so much public distrust right now of the administration and of Congress that what we really need is an independent commission. And I'm wondering what it would take for you to support that.
Well, look, it's, I don't disagree with what you said about making sure the public's informed, which is why at the outset of my remarks, I tried to kind of lay out what's going to happen now with the special counsel being stood up. And you're right, and one of the things I tried to mention, that might limit some of the access because there's a potential, criminal element to what they're looking at. The Senate Intelligence Committee, and I'm glad you mentioned Burr and Warner. So Senator Burr is the chairman. He's from North Carolina. He's a Republican. Warner is the Democrat. He's the ranking member. And actually, his office is right next to mine. Really good guy. Actually, if you look at the members of that committee, and I know them all well, it's a really, really serious committee, and they are putting as much effort and time and seriousness into this issue. And look, hopefully you've seen my comments. I don't think Russia's a country we should trust. I think they're an adversary. I think we need to push back on them as much as we can, and that's been my view for a long, long time. And they, tried to disrupt our election. They support the biggest state sponsor of terrorism in the world, Iran. They backed Bashar al-Assad in Syria, who, with Russian help, bombs hospitals with innocent, children in the hospitals. I mean, they're not, and they've invaded another country, Ukraine. So, and by the way, they're building up in the Arctic. They've sent 5 Bear bomber runs to our sovereign airspace in the last month, where our brave men and women from the Air Force here have had to intercept them. But right now, I believe that the Senate Intel Committee is working well. It's working in a very bipartisan way, and I believe that they can continue to do that. If I don't think that's going to happen, maybe what you're talking about is something we should look at. But more importantly, it's not me. If you listen to Burr and Warner, the top Republican and top Democrat on that committee, they believe it's working well too. So I think that's where the counter intel and some of the Russian activity elements that they're investigating should remain for the time being. Thank you. I just answered the question.
Okay. Thank you all for coming. I want to thank Donna Marie for giving introductory remarks. Thanks again. Please drive safe. Thanks.
Thank you.